committee meeting morning, which we always look forward to, and we begin with opening for outside comment, public comment. Stephanie, why don't you introduce the first requested speaker?
Our first public comment is from Aaron Good from the Graduate Student Association.
Hi. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the input of the Graduate Student Association this morning.
Sure.
We've drafted a letter on the topic of fees, so I'll just read that to you. Dear members of the LSU Board of Supervisors, we are writing to express our concern over the rising fees imposed on LSU students and their impact on LSU's graduate workers. Increases in graduate teaching assistant, or TA, stipends implemented by LSU have not compensated for the increase in fees, and graduate research assistants, or RAs, do not even benefit from these stipend increases. As a result, we find ourselves in an increasingly untenable financial situation as student workers at this institution. Graduate students are offered tuition waivers that we see as a type of benefit of being employed at LSU, so an increase in tuition is not detrimental. By addressing budgetary shortfalls with the addition of fees as opposed to tuition increases, LSU has been reducing the benefits allotted to their graduate workers, and this has the effect of making LSU graduate programs less competitive with other peer institutions. An additional result of this accounting designation is that the burden of the budget shortfall is placed on graduate workers. Our current wages after fees are, on average, significantly lower than a living wage in the parish, but graduate workers are prohibited from taking up any additional external employment by visa restrictions and university policy. Because of this, graduate assistants at LSU are forced to rely on charitable services and unsafe methods of earning additional income to make ends meet. For example, graduate workers comprise a majority of LSU Food Pantry's clients, despite making up a minority of the LSU student population. Many current graduate students feel it is irresponsible to recommend pursuing graduate studies at LSU to prospective students, given this imposed low quality of living. We firmly believe that pursuing higher education should not come at the cost of our health, safety, and dignity, and that it is unethical to subject other prospective students to such conditions. LSU has a responsibility to provide everyone on campus with safe working conditions, and we believe that this responsibility extends to providing a living wage to all of its employees, including graduate workers. In order to mitigate some of the financial pressure on graduate students, we are requesting that we be exempt from the non-required fees, which, despite their name, are mandatory to pay. Specifically, the student excellence fee and the academic excellence fee, as parts of these fees are used to finance services that graduate assistants are responsible for providing. Lifting these fee requirements would greatly alleviate the financial burden on the graduate student body, and we hope that you seriously consider this measure when instituting fees for the 2018 to 2019 academic year. Sincerely, the LSU Graduate Student Association, on behalf of the university's graduate student body. Additionally, we have a letter from the chair of the Environmental Sciences Department, Kevin L. Armbrust, basically stating that their faculty also supports with the request that student fee waivers should be included with tuition waivers or that fees should be reduced. So I have a copy of this letter, and then I'm not sure I have enough copies of the initial letter, but I did bring 20 because I saw there were 18 of you on the board, but there might be more of you, so I can pass these around as well.
Here, Aaron, I can take it.
Okay.
Aaron, thank you very much. And as a former graduate student who was completely dependent on first my assistantship and then later my fellowship, I understand. I feel it, and I'll start the meeting today by saying something very non-controversial. The entire manner in which we fund post-secondary education, provide support to students, set tuition, set fees through universities all over the United States, in every state, how we build the generations to come of intellectual capital is completely broken. And the way that we do it, the way that we fund universities and the burdens that we put on students. Look, the president has been a great national spokesman of how this needs to get better. Louisiana's going through a micro version of this right now. And I hope that here and throughout the United States, we're going to come up with a whole new rethink about how higher education in particular works and how we bring in and attract and recruit and support these next generations of graduate students and undergraduates. So thank you very much for your concern. Your voice and your remarks do not fall on deaf ears. It's a huge problem.
Thank you very much for taking the time to hear us today.
And if I can just thank the Graduate Students Association and for helping us in Washington, because in that tax reform bill, that would have been absolutely devastating if they had actually used the tuition waivers and applied it as income to our graduate students, which was remarkably, it just baffles. It's baffling to see that the graduate students are going to be subsidizing tax breaks elsewhere. So we appreciate the work that the graduate students did at the federal level, and we're going to need your help in the next couple months downtown in stabilizing our funding so we can better address these issues.
And don't give up. The voice of students and young people right now is becoming the loudest we've seen in the last generation and a half. So thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. I hope you'll consider our proposal.
Ken, you out there? You ready?
Mr.
We
Perry,
appreciate all your help, by the way. It's been great to work with you.
Mr. Perry, members of the board, Dr. Alexander, it's somewhat contrived, but I'm speaking as an individual faculty member instead of for the collective faculty on this item of the Council Faculty Advisors Report, which is on your agenda. We well understand that each of you take your responsibilities as a board member to supervise and manage the institutions really seriously. That's well understood, and we appreciate that you're also very concerned about the accountability and the reporting lines at LSU. Unfortunately, there have been many situations that have received public attention downtown and in state agency management and also here on the LSU campus, and every one of those instances has had the potential, if not actuality, of having negative publicity and losing trust in our agencies. There is a tendency to overreact and propose severe actions to prevent those in serious occurrences. I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind you that many good things are happening at LSU. We have a new strategic plan that you oversaw and have approved. We have risk management procedures being implemented and overseen at this point in time. Many of our current policy statements are being revised and reviewed. So respectfully, I would request that any decisions that you make be based on accurate information, not on emotional or political sentiments, and to trust the faculty and staff and the students and the administration at each of our respective campuses in your deliberations. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I hope you have a great LSU day and a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Well, you know you're full grown when you introduce the children of your old friends to address the board. Donald, if you would come forward. Donald's father is an old friend of mine and probably had the greatest, most mellifluous voice that ever was at the Senate microphone in Louisiana.
Mr. Chairman, he reminds me I do not have that voice every day.
Well,
my brother does, Dustin, and they're both there, so they can do my presentation in their voices if it would be.
Well, we're glad we're glad Erica's here as well, and just want to tell you that, you know, for a long, long time, back from the days of Clarence Barney, I've been a huge fan of the Urban League in New Orleans and what it's done, and Mark Morial and I have been friends forever and ever, and of course what he does nationally, and it's wonderful to see the two of you together here before the LSU board. It really matters. And Donald, we'll leave it to you, and you kick off.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the board. It is an honor to be here. It is good always to come back home to Louisiana, but really home here to Louisiana State University. And I am joined today by a great friend and colleague, Ms. Erica McConduit. I represent the National Urban League, and Ms. McConduit is the president and CEO of the Louisiana Urban League, Urban League of Louisiana. Absolutely. And so we're going to be talking to you today, one, to thank you and to applaud you for the work that you are undertaking in supplier diversity, the work that you've been doing in diversity and inclusion. We want to make the case of why the work that you're doing is important to the country, it's important to the local area, and important to the university, and we want to offer our help. Absolutely. That is, as you move forward in this endeavor, that the Urban League is here to support you. So we'll get started. As I said, the Urban League was founded in 1910. We've got 90 affiliates. Ms. McConduit, as Mark Morial said today, is the benchmark of the Urban League. Her affiliates here in Louisiana, both in New Orleans and now in Baton Rouge, set a very, very high standard. The Louisiana Urban League, Erica, was founded in
1938. We are 80 years old, so deeply rooted in this community. As Don indicated, we expanded just a year and a half ago statewide and have established an office in Baton Rouge and are excited to get to work in this community as well.
So, point of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman. As I said, I'm happy to be here at home. LSU has a very special place in my heart. I would not have met the chair-elect if it had not been for LSU. The first day I got to LSU in 1990, I was living in Kirby Smith Dormitory, and I was walking to the McDonald's down the hill. And I remember as I was walking back from the McDonald's, someone rolled down the window and yelled a racial slur at me and says, "Go back home." And I had an opportunity then. I had to make a judgment, Mr. Chairman. I had to decide whether I was going to pack my stuff and go home or whether I was going to stay here at LSU. And so I had to really, Rolf, I had to do an inventory. And so as I sat in Kirby Smith dorm, I said, well, my grandfather hitchhiked every day from Lawtell, Louisiana, to build Kirby Smith Dormitory. He remembered being the tallest building he had ever seen in his entire life. And that McDonald's that I'd gone to was the same McDonald's, Glenn, that my dad worked at to send himself to Southern University. And so I realized then in 1990, this is my home. And I've been coming home each and every year I can to say LSU is my home. And LSU gave me an opportunity to better myself, to better my family, and I've now sent you the best thing, the best work I've ever done, and that's my daughter, who's a freshman here. And so I am here today to say what you're doing is important, and it's something we all have to be involved in, and that's creating opportunity for people. The Urban League in the 1960s, our president and CEO, Mr. Whitney Young, he's a good-looking guy. I get told that he looks like me and my father all the time. He sat down with President Nixon, and he said, "Mr. Nixon, African Americans are being told to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. But we've never been given boots and we don't have any straps. And so one of the things we can do, Mr. President, is if we can just get Negroes who want to work, who want an opportunity, and we can diversify, we can include them, and we can do business with folks, we can reach some economic empowerment. And that is what the Urban League of the National Urban League and the Urban League of Louisiana, it's all we've been fighting for the last 60 years. Mr. Young looked at the statistics, and what it showed in the 1960s was that a white family averaged $6,000 a year in income, and a black family, a Negro family there, averaged $3,000 in income. So it was a 2-to-1 ratio then. An African American in 1962 was 2.5 to 3 times more likely to be unemployed. He thought that supplier diversity was a way you could fix some of those things because you could do it through small business. And so in addition to job creation, that was one way we could fix it. So the National Urban League started publishing the State of Black America report. And we started in the 1970s. And the reason why we published this report is to continue to track those same numbers that Mr. Young talked to President Nixon about. So we've been tracking the unemployment numbers. And when you look at the unemployment numbers from 2017 in our beloved New Orleans, and Erica can talk more about this, the black unemployment rate in 2017 was 10.4%. Compared to our white brothers and sisters, their unemployment rate was 5.1%. Even when the economy is good for Americans, African Americans are still 2.5 to 3 times more likely to be unemployed, even 40 years later. The state of Louisiana, our white unemployment rate is a very low 4.1%. That's something to be proud of. But when you look at our African American brothers and sisters, it's 10.7%. I know when we talk about these numbers in Louisiana, sometimes it is difficult. It's uncomfortable. We look at people as them and us. And we should be looking at, it's all us. It's all us. Because when any group of Louisianans is not doing well, none of us are doing really well. When I served in the legislature, I didn't turn my white constituents away and say, I'm here for the black folk. Because I wanted all my people to do well. LSU has an opportunity with your supplier diversity to change some of those numbers. We also look at the income. When you look at the incomes, white income in 2017 averaged around $60,000. The African American income was half that, 50 cents for every dollar. Think about that as businessmen and women on the panel. You own businesses, you want people to do business with you. I could do a lot more business with you if I had a full dollar to buy gas or buy groceries than if I had 50 cents on the dollar. I wanted you to see those statistics because I think sometimes we know things are bad, but we really don't know how bad they really are. And when you look at the fact that since 1963, we've done worse proportionately.
So I will bring it a little bit closer to home. First, let me start by saying, as Don has given you guys his daughter, I am hopeful that I will also send my daughter in the fall. She just received her admission letter, so we're excited about it, and are looking for LSU to continue to be a leader in this community. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the data and talk about poverty in Louisiana. Poverty, of course, remains a significant issue facing African Americans across the country. But in Louisiana, 32% of African Americans live in poverty. But living above the poverty line is not an indicator of economic wellness either. There is a group that we consider the working poor in Louisiana. African Americans in Louisiana represent 42% of these households. So collectively, these families are struggling to afford basic household needs. Let's bring it closer to home in Baton Rouge, where your flagship is located. Baton Rouge has experienced economic gains in recent years. It was noted to be one of the nation's cities with the best business climate, one of the top 10 regional South MSAs, one of the top 10 U.S. metropolitan areas with the highest level of manufacturing productivity. Yet, despite these tremendous economic gains in this city alone, disparities indicate that African Americans are being left behind. So let's look at the data in Baton Rouge. It is consistent with some of the data points you heard from Don. The African American employment rate in EBR is 9%. Of course, more than double that of whites at 3.9%. Again, you see the disparity in terms of median household income. And of course, again, poverty rate of African Americans is more than double that of whites in Baton Rouge. Let me give you just a little bit more in terms of your opportunity in terms of supplier diversity. There are about 12,000 black firms in Baton Rouge. About a fourth of them have paid employees. Their total average net business sales receipts is about just over 140,000. So consequently, African Americans have not reaped the benefits of the economic gains experienced in this community. But there is an opportunity.
So we want you, like I said, we want to applaud you on the diversity. You know, we look at diversity as being asked to a dance. It's great to be invited to participate in the dance, but inclusion is actually getting asked to dance when you get to the dance, right? And so we do applaud you for all of the work that you've done. We believe, again, that supplier diversity, which you are going to hear testimony on today, promotes ownership, promotes entrepreneurial activities. We believe that supplier diversity programs promote business programs that encourage the use of African American and women-owned, Latino-owned businesses and suppliers of goods and services. This is just a quick glance of what minority business entities look in the country. You can look at it, but there are many, our point is there are many businesses that are ready to do business, and although we're seeing the growth of more and more women-owned businesses and more black-owned businesses, as Erica said, the volume, the sales, they just aren't there yet. Your program is going to be able to make a difference. Your program is going to be able to help someone hire an employee. If you're wondering, well, how are we supposed to be fixing these unemployment numbers? Because some of these unemployed, ladies and gentlemen, are persistently unemployed people. They're people who made a mistake in life. They're someone who won't get hired by a big company. but maybe the smaller company will. They'll give them a second chance. Boy, I know your mama. I know your daddy. I'm going to give you a second chance. I'm going to give you a third chance. That's how we get those people off of the tax burden role and into the taxpayer role. There was a study that was done in February 16th, 2017 by the Hackett Research Group, and this is what it said about diversity and inclusion. Virtually all diversity suppliers meet or exceed expectations, and top corporate performers in supplier diversity experience no loss in efficiency. Companies see improved quality and often extract other benefits, including increased market share and access to new revenue opportunities. LSU is one of the biggest businesses in the state. We are attesting to you today that more diversity and inclusion will be good for the business of this university. Companies that allocate 20% or more of the spending to diverse suppliers can attribute 10 to 15% of their annual sales to supplier diversity programs. So here are some recommendations, members of the board. Consider expanding beyond traditional goals as complying with just the regulations you seek today. Recognize the value of objectives such as the ability to gain access to new markets, to improve partnerships. I'm saying don't just make it a goal. Oh, we got to do this. You in your personal businesses, you know when you got to do something just to do it, it's not as fun. It's not as robust. Make this a goal, but give some other objectives. Look beyond the basic measures, such as the percentages of spend with diverse suppliers, and calculate the true value of supplier diversity by using more sophisticated performance metrics, such as satisfaction levels and other secondary metrics that are aligned to long and short-term goals. If you do business with an African-American caterer, measure the satisfaction from the work. We enjoyed the food. It was good service. Those are the types of things that should be part of this as well. Companies must make diversity and inclusion a priority, and it has to be a top-down approach, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. It's critical that the president, the board, make the commitment to establishing a company culture that is welcoming of diverse backgrounds. And that is why we are here today, to tell you you're doing it right. You are making it a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. Companies with a world-class procurement organization devote 33% or more of their spend to diverse suppliers compared with the average companies.
All right, again, as the agency on the ground, we want to be your partner in this. I'm pleased to meet your staff who are going to be leading this work at the university, and I'm excited and committed to partnering with them. What you see before you is just a list of certifying agencies. We all know that we want to measure risk and make sure that who we're doing business with can actually perform. Here's a list of certifying agencies in the state of Louisiana. Here is how we can identify diverse suppliers. Oftentimes we hear, we'd love to do business, Erica, we want to, but we can't find any. We can't find the companies to do business with. Well, here is a comprehensive list of where you can go to help identify some diverse suppliers right here in Baton Rouge, and of course beyond. LSU is our flagship university for the state. Right? Your tentacles outstretch into multiple areas around the state, and there are diverse suppliers in every pocket of this state that you operate who can do business with you. So let's talk about some Louisiana minority suppliers that I think you should be interested in and you should know about. Capital Energy right now has $25 million in contracts with the Orleans Parish School Board and the Recovery School District on school construction projects in New Orleans. They're doing work at the airport, at churches. You can see their list is extensive. Malone Electrical Services. Remember I said that most minority businesses have not had access to the investment and the capital that other businesses have, and so they traditionally have employed few paid members of their staff. Well, if you look at Malone Electrical Services, she employs 27 technicians and administrative staffers. She has $4 million in bonding, and she also has a mentor-protege agreement. Those are the things that we want to encourage to be put in place between diverse suppliers and majority suppliers so that more business can be accomplished. NOLA Steel Fabrication and Erection Services, again, she has been able to win large projects with the New Orleans Airport, the Army Corps of Engineers, NASA, Stennis Space Center. There are suppliers and vendors out there ready to do business. And of course, there are some in Baton Rouge as well. One I want to highlight is just a smaller business SG Contracting, which currently has a contract with LSU for some commercial cleaning services. She is a woman-owned business, a minority-owned business, and a veteran-owned business. That is important. Again, there are construction entities like NRK out there with high capacity in order to do high volume. Our women's business, the Urban League operates a women's business resource and entrepreneurship center. We work with minority suppliers. We want to make sure that they are ready to perform properly on the jobs that are made available to them. We want them to fairly compete and fairly perform the work. One project of note is the RSD OPSB school rebuilding project. We joined the DBE team at a time when there was less than 2% DBE participation. Now every single project with intentionality is averaging 24 to 35% DBE participation.
So in conclusion, members, as we said earlier, our productivity as a nation is compromised if we fail to tap in our diverse talent pool that exists. We do ourselves and our future generations a disservice when we bow out or we ignore our interconnectivity. If America wants to remain the leader in innovation and business on a global stage, if LSU wants to remain a leader on the state stage, on the local stage, we have to tap into the full potential of our citizens, of all our small businesses. And so as I said at the very beginning, we applaud you for the work that you started, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman-elect, Mr. President, all the members of the board. We hope that you see the value in this, that this is not a us versus them or just another thing we got to do because somebody's making us do it. This is going to be good for LSU. This is going to be good for Baton Rouge. This is going to be good for the state of Louisiana. This is going to continue taking our university. Flagship comes with obligation. Comes with obligation. It's not easy. It's not easy. And I'm looking forward to some national championships and a lot of those other things, Mr. Chairman. But this is a game changer. It's a game changer. I was given an opportunity to come here because LSU decided we needed some African-American students, and they created a Black Honor Scholarship. Didn't have one before. That's why I came. That's why I came. Some people could call that affirmative action. Some people could say, oh, you did something special. I hope that I've paid it back. I hope that I paid it back. I believe the chairman-elect was on one of those scholarships. Sometimes you gotta make a concerted effort. Sometimes you gotta do a little extra for our brothers and sisters. That's how we see the supplier diversity. It's just a little extra, a little lanyard, Glenn, a little lanyard. But we owe it to our brothers and sisters because they're us. They're us. The Urban League is here to help you, Mr. Chairman. Urban League of Louisiana, the National Urban League. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Donald and Erica, thank both of you very, very much for providing a very succinct and broad brush but specific presentation to us. This year, Chair-elect and I made a commitment that we wanted to go in tandem back to back on this particular issue because the reality is we believe in capitalism, but we also know that capitalism is a rough and tumble environment. And it also means that instead of having what we've had over the years, rough objectives that make people feel good because they're there, we're beyond that. It takes effort, it takes commitment, and what we wanted to do is to begin to change, have a cultural transformation within the inner workings of our university, because that's how we get there. Extraordinarily, the admits for 18-19 for LSU are up to 47% non-white. It's staggering compared to when I was a young freshman here. So we hear you. We believe that there is a mantle of responsibility to be trend-setting and to change culture and to change process. And so we thank you for what your organization does nationally and for what we do in New Orleans and now expanding statewide, which is absolutely terrific. Mr. Chair-elect, did you want to make a comment before I change? No, thank you. Mr. President, do you have any comment? At this point, we're going to
Let James.
Thank you. So, with Chairman's privilege, what I'm going to do is to switch the order so that our distinguished guests can hear some of the future discussion, and I'm going to call The Finance, Infrastructure, and Core Development Committee up next. Mr. Blake Chatelain is chair. Mr. Chairman, would you please convene the Finance Committee?
If I could say one thing about the presentation, I think Don and Erica, thank you very much. Part of our strategic plan at the forefront of how we want our university to be measured is are we addressing the issue of poverty? And are we reducing the issue of poverty, inequality throughout our state? And we've taken this as part of our strategic plan that we're going to measure our university based on are we solving the biggest problems in our state. Poverty is certainly one of them. So this whole university, from every college to our campuses throughout the state, have a responsibility, and it is part of our strategic plan to work with you to eradicate poverty anywhere and everywhere it is in this state, number one. Number two, part of that eradication of poverty is, I'm pleased to say, in 2 months we will graduate the most diverse graduating class in the history of LSU. And also, Erica, when we get your daughter in here, she will be in the most diverse entering class in the history of LSU. That's all related to eradicating poverty, and that is our job as a flagship university. So thank you very much for both the work that you're doing with us and the work that you do each and every day.
She may not like how many people are keeping an eye on her, though.
Definitely.
Especially the new chair.
That's right. That's right.
Blake.
All right, good deal. Stephanie, if you would, please call the roll.
Mr. Chatelain?
Here.
Ms. Jones? Here. Ms. Johnson? Here. Mr. Mallett? Here. Mr. McCreary? Here. Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 items to discuss today. One is an update and a presentation, no action required at this time, and the other is an action item. But first of all, without needing a lot of introduction, because have been talking about it, will be to receive an update on the supplier diversity program. And I just would add my comments that I know our administration and this board is certainly committed to diversity in all areas within our responsibility. And so I think that where we are today is kind of an update on the desire to make sure that our plans, our policies, our procedures kind of keep in step with our commitment for that kind of diversity throughout our program. And so want to look at supplier diversity and not just commit ourselves to it verbally, but make sure that our plans and our policies and practices help us to achieve that. And so here to kind of get an update on how that is coming, Dan Lazelle will walk us through that. So Dan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chatelain, members of the board. Don and Erica provided an extraordinarily compelling reason for why supplier diversity is important. And we agree completely, 100%. LSU should be, as the flagship, should be a leader in this. And so over the past several months, as you know, we've been working toward developing our own supplier diversity program with, of course, the board's support and direction and support to get this in place. We are on target to have the program up and running fully by late summer of this year. And with that, I would like to invite Sally McKechnie and Barbara Robillard, who are leading on the ground, leading this effort for us, to come up and give us an update on where things are with the program. So with that, I will turn it over to Sally and Barbara.
Thank you, Chairman, Board. That's a tough act to follow. Thank you very much. We look forward to the opportunity to have that kind of support to make sure that this program really does do what it needs to do for the state and for LSU. We've hired our diversity manager, Barbara Robillard. Barbara comes to us from Spring Branch Independent School District with 20 years of procurement experience, as well as a lot of experience in the hub zone area and diverse suppliers in Texas. I'm going to let Barbara jump in here and do a little bit of the presentation so she can get her feet wet, so I don't have to be here every time.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I will agree with Sally. Don and Erica's a tough act to follow, but I do my best. So I come to you with an overwhelming desire to try and make a difference. I believe in trying to be a transformative leader in terms of change for the better. and so I'm excited. I can say that since I have been hired, I have received amazing support, not only from Sally and the team, but Dan and Tyler, as well as the Board of Supervisors. So let's see if I can get into the presentation and share with you where we are thus far. Am I clicking? So the mission. The mission is to provide leadership and develop relationships that will connect the Louisiana's diverse businesses, enterprises that result in inclusiveness and meaningful economic impact for Louisiana State University and the community. And it really is all about relationships. It's all about relationship and inclusiveness, and Dawn, as well as Erica, as well as Sally have expressed that, and we know that's true. Relationships are so meaningful in every area and every facet of our life, and we can employ people, employ businesses, and give them opportunity. It affects the community and all of us as a whole in terms of positiveness. Principles. Principles to effectively demonstrate our commitment to the Supply Diversity Program. LSU will, and we have 3 bullets there. Conduct business in an innovative manner that seeks to expand opportunities to small business. Build strategic business partners to add substantive economic value to the state of Louisiana. Demonstrate continuous growth in the Supply Diversity Program. Some of the ways in which we're going to do this is we've created a How to Do Business with LSU flyer. So we're putting that on the website, as well as doing webinars and seminars, workshops, developing a mentor-protege program that we can connect Tier 1 vendors with Tier 2 vendors in terms of developing relationships. Governors. It's really important that we make sure that we cover whatever the expectation in terms of the law. Office of Supply Diversity has been created. Legal and regulatory requirements are being reviewed. Policies and procedures are being created. Campus training and policies and procedures will be ongoing, it started last month, and we continue to that program throughout the life of this program opportunity.
So, policies and procedures, as Barbara said in the last slide, have been created. They have been actually disseminated to campus. In those procedures, it talks about if you're doing a quote, depending on the bid thresholds, how many diverse suppliers do you need to target, and what is the requirement. So we will be teaching and training on that to the campus at large. As Don and Erica spoke about, it's about changing the culture. And thankfully we have this support because we can change the culture. We can definitely make a difference by implementing good procurement practices that include diversity, inclusion. Also, it's important to note that we do have a strong commitment. Several of my senior procurement staff are here today, and that is to show their commitment to this endeavor. So we have been working on, go back one. We've been working on what is the spend? What does LSU spend? The spend for LSU operational campuses, as well as all of the health science centers. Identifying the spend first so that we know what our targets are. We're actually reviewing all of the various commodities at this point and what is included in that spend. There are some categories that we will never be able to impact the spend. One that is always a good example is through the NCAA, for basketball and football and all of the sports, we can't pick our own referees. We spend money on referees. That's a spend that we can't impact. So we'll be looking at what can we impact and what can't we. We'll be developing with the work group that's been established the goals, and what does that goal look like? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Is it 40%? And start to reach to meet those goals. Looking at the marketplace, developing vendors and bringing vendors to the table, understanding where all of those vendors are, using those resource agencies to make sure that the vendors are certified and we're able to use them. We'll be developing benchmarks for reporting with the work of the work group as well to ensure that we're meeting the targets and goals, and not just meeting the 10%, but an example of that is if we are soliciting suppliers, and they're not bidding. How many are bidding? How many are being awarded on those bids that they're submitted? And helping develop those suppliers and those relationships with them. Our immediate will be to look at impacting several of the easy commodities to impact, janitorial, office supplies, promotional supplies, catering, equipment, those kinds of things. It gets a little more difficult to impact things like utilities or hotels. Everyone has a travel card, so they go to hotels all over the place. That's spend that we probably cannot impact, but we're looking at strategic ways that we can look at diverse suppliers. As a matter of fact, Marriott is one of the top 50 countries in the state that has a very robust diversity program. So we'll be looking at how can we partner and maybe do some negotiated deals with some of those larger companies that can help us meet our second-tier goal for supplier diversity. You probably can't see this from there, but this is just our master contract holders. And we started actually looking at this information last year. We started saying, okay, what is your supplier diversity program? And tell us what you're doing as a company. And so all of these master contract holders have been reporting. And you can see that last year we had about $800,000 in spend that we monitored from our master contract holders. This year we're 6 months into the year and we're already at $1.1 million in spend on diverse suppliers. And this is just tier 2. So we know we can hit those goals and make it an effective program. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work in marketing and communications, facilitating, networking opportunities, developing suppliers to have business-to-business platforms, as well as educating employees, management, suppliers, and the community at large about our efforts and what we're doing. One of the things we have coming up, and we've already scheduled, is we're doing a Doing Business with LSU Forum. We'll be reaching out to all of those lists of suppliers that Erica shared earlier to participate in an event at Lod Cook in June to actually grow our supplier base.
Right now, we currently have in our database approximately 17,000 vendors that are in this current supplier base. Out of that, 1,400, a little bit over 1,400 are classified as diversity suppliers. And those categories are listed there for you. So again, our immediate goal is to be very aggressive and improve that significantly and to build that database there.
So how do we measure success? Looking at our spend annually, determining areas where we can increase our spend, because there are some areas where there are more diverse suppliers available to us than others. Looking at using that reporting. Conducting annual business reviews with our major contract holders, holding their feet to the fire. If it's in the contract and you have a requirement that LSU has said to meet in our goals, we will make sure that those suppliers in our contract holders meet those goals. Measuring the percentage of diverse spend year over year, as well as looking at, as I mentioned before, how many bidders responded and how many were awarded. If they're responding and they're not awarding, then we know we have more work to do with those diverse suppliers in helping them partner with resources and helping them to be more competitive in the environment to actually get the bids and get the work from LSU. And lastly, we've included basically a strategy roadmap, and that's where we're going and how we expect to get there in the very near future. Questions?
Any questions?
Sure. I'd just like to say a great presentation, and I'm very interested in the Doing Business with LSU Forum, and would like to talk to you because the business board would like to help promote that.
Perfect.
So, great idea.
Thank you.
I do want to say, first I want to say thank you to the National Urban League and Urban League of Louisiana. I was college roommates and fraternity brothers with Donald Cravens, and he was just as smooth then as he is now. It is just, he's exactly right. I mean, everybody on the board knows the story of me losing a scholarship, and the one I lost was the LSU Black Honor Scholarship that Cravens talked about. So programs like that can make a difference. And so I want to thank you all for all the information you provided to us. This board has been extremely supportive of this effort from the beginning. It has been higher education is not a very nimble organization, but slowly and methodically we have gotten to a place that I think we all can be proud of. This started with Chairman Ballard, then Chairman Ballard, who refused to let this issue die, and with the support of then Chair-elect Perry and the entire board, we were able to keep this issue at the forefront of the university. And though we have had lots of discussions about this, I have to just really thank Dan and Sally and Barbara, who I have had the pleasure to now meet, for putting together what is really a robust program. In the interest of time, they couldn't do it all, but we spent the working group yesterday, board members Werner, Jones, Ballard, myself, and other members outside the board who belong to a working group on this issue. We had a 2-hour meeting yesterday, and this binder is full of all kind of little itty-bitty print like the other stuff she had on the screen. But it is and it's not just fluff. I mean, this is a very well thought out plan that they worked very hard on that is going to have a lasting impact. We are the leaders in this state. The universities exist primarily to educate. And the example we are setting today through our efforts are not only going to be helpful to the university, not only going to be helpful to our citizens, which is something I think we out as we fight for higher education and we fight for more funding for higher education, being able to demonstrate what a good citizen we are being like this. You know, that this should matter to the Legislative Black Caucus. This should matter to all of the members of the legislature, that we are taking proactive, this is not a result of a lawsuit or a federal consent decree. This is voluntary action by the LSU board to make a significant and serious impact. And I think everyone should take notice of the kind of citizen we're being, and it should be educational to other organizations and businesses around the state. So I thank everyone for putting this program together. We certainly have work to do, and I encourage you to continue to seek the resources of those outside of the university who are more familiar with this and can help us put meat on the bone, so to speak. But the effort undertaken thus far is something I think we all can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I get a minute? Yeah.
Mr. Ballard?
Thank you. Well, James obviously is like you, Don, a very good speaker. And but the wonderful thing about it is he's passionate, means every word, and he's willing to put the time, effort. And I think that's what it takes. I think everybody on this board that sits here, from Mary to Glenn and all in between, decided to really support this. And I truly don't think it wasn't that others didn't want to. I think it's the reason you're here. It's about education, continuing to educate, give the numbers. You can disagree without being disagreeable and get to a common place. I think that's what this is about. I happened to spend a lot of time talking to Mr. Perry and James in the past when we were doing this, and we spent a lot of time. And you know when you have conversations and you know it's a conversation or it's a conversation you want to have, it was wonderful because it was one we wanted to have. We wanted to see a difference. We debated. We didn't agree on every way to get to the end, but we definitely agreed that it's not where it needs to be. We definitely agreed that you need to set goals, and as James and Mr. Perry have said, if you don't set, what is that percentage? Is it 15, 20, 25, 30? Nobody's going to hold nobody's going to be mad if you don't get there. You're going to be mad if you're not working towards getting there. And I think that's kind of what we decided to do. And it's great that the president put together a diversity team made up of people outside of the board and on the board. And I'm proud to be on that. And it's truly, truly to make a difference. You know, be remiss if we didn't thank Dan, who's really taken, from an executive perspective, the lead on this. He's took a lot of bullets and a lot of things that didn't necessarily deserve to come his way, that he inherited some lack of effort towards this, but he took it with grace, and I appreciate that, Dan, and you made this a priority, and so did you, Sally, and bringing in Barbara. These are things that I hope all of us recognize that weren't there before, and they didn't just happen. It happened, like James said, not because anybody told us we had to from a court or your organization or others. We did it because it's the right thing to do. We're going to disagree on how to get there. I can assure you, in this meeting, I will debate certain things, but I can assure you also we will be better. We're not where we need to be. You're exactly right. The numbers don't lie, and there's reasons. And as long as everybody is willing to look at it from that perspective and not argue about the why, but argue about how do we get there, this will be a wonderful, wonderful thing that I think the country will look at us as board members and people outside, and we will be the example. And that is a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Any other questions or comments?
Just Sally and Barbara, we're not going to give up on that referee selection process. We'd love to add that to your portfolio.
King, I thought Alabama paid for referees, so sorry. Any other questions or comments? Dan, Sally, Barbara, thank you so much for that presentation, and we look forward to continuing to monitor this and hear more as it moves along. The next item on our agenda comes from our Shreveport Med School. I think all of us know that we are committed to growing our med school in Shreveport and continuing to improve access, and so this proposal that is before you will help to do both of those things. So, Dan or Dr. Ghali, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As Mr. Chatelain noted, Shreveport Medical School does currently have a plan over a number of years to grow their class size from 125 students per class to 150 over a number of years. As part of that effort, both to grow the overall size of the school and to enhance the diversity of their medical school population, they are bringing forward 3 tuition waiver programs for your consideration. The first program is an academic excellence tuition waiver, which is focused certainly to provide financial aid to high-achieving incoming and continuing students. The second one is a disadvantaged background tuition waiver, likewise to recognize and support high-performing students, but also those high-performing students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds whose families or themselves lack the financial resources appropriately to pay for the significant cost associated with medical education. The third tuition waiver program that they are bringing forward is an underrepresented in medicine ethnic or racial group tuition waiver program, again, to recognize those medical students, high-achieving medical students, but also recognize those from racial and ethnic groups who are historically or traditionally underrepresented in medical schools. The total number of waivers that would be supported by each of these programs would be 8 for the academic excellence tuition waiver, or 2 per class, 8 for the disadvantaged background tuition waiver, again, or 2 per class, or 24 for the underrepresented in medicine ethnic or racial group tuition waiver, or 6 per class. So in total, there'll be 40 waivers. It will be phased in over 4 years. The first year cost, which would begin in July of this year, would be $286,000, growing to, by the time of full implementation, about $1.1 million annually for the cost of this program. So with that, we certainly ask for your support of this request, and I would turn it over to Chancellor Ghali to see if he has anything he'd want to add with regard to this program, these programs.
No, I think that Dr. Lazell did a great job in explaining it. I think this has been a long time in coming. You know, we talk about diversification and giving back and trying to help. I think this is a way to potentially provide funding, tuition waiver for 40 individuals that may otherwise not be able to become physicians and practice in the state of Louisiana. So I hope the board looks favorably upon this. I think it's a good thing. And as Dr. Lazell says, it'll be phased over a 4-year period so that there'll be a total of 40. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Dr. Ghali, could you just comment on how, in terms of not enrollment, but applications, what are you seeing demand-wise?
Right. Well, you know, the issue that we see, and it's not just in Shreveport, it's in New Orleans as well, is that we lose a lot of the highly qualified candidates to medical school that that graduate from the historically black colleges and universities in the South. They end up getting scholarships to go to medical schools and dental schools and things like that up in the Northeast. Not just a tuition waiver, they actually get a stipend. It's hard in the current budget situation for us to provide any kind of stipends, but certainly if we can provide something like this, which is a tuition waiver, maybe it'll encourage our own folks to stay in the state and train here. And you know, if you look at the statistics, Blake, many of the students that end up training, and it's even worse when it gets, you go past medical school and get into where they're doing their residencies. When we lose students, and then it's even worse with residents, they end up staying in that particular state where they got their training or where they went to medical school. So we certainly would like to keep them here. We'd also like to encourage, you know, some out-of-state people to come here, and then maybe this is a way to do that as well.
All right. Questions? No questions? Could I entertain a motion to approve the request before you?
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, that concludes the work of the Finance and Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chatelain. Mr. Glenn Armentor, Chairman of Academic and Student Affairs, Achievement and Distinction, will you convene your committee?
It is my pleasure to do so. Thank you. I do convene the Academic Committee. Stephanie, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Armentor?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Anderson? Ms. Johnson? Here. Ms. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Williams? He's here. Chair, you have quorum.
Mr. Chairman, board members, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited about the news that we're going to present today in the Academic Committee. It's cutting-edge scholarship information. I think you'll be excited about it as well. Let me call on Provost Kubek to present the first of 3 award items.
Yes, to begin this conversation, I just want to remind you that about 2 years ago, the President asked us to take a hard look at our enrollment management processes. That required us to do some reorganization of that entity, and also to take a look at our scholarship programs. But probably the cornerstone of that reinvigoration of enrollment management was for our institution to look for the top talent in enrollment management field in the nation. And I'm delighted today to invite Jose Avila, who's our Chief Enrollment Officer, to come forward to the podium. We've asked Jose to give you a brief update on what's happening with the enrollment process going on right now. And Jose is also the architect and the mastermind behind this new portfolio of scholarships. I've also asked him to speak to you a bit about the strategy that you're going to see presented today, and then perhaps a few of the details. Upon completion of that, we would like to propose all 3 of these scholarships simultaneously. Dr. Avila?
Thank you, Dr. Kubek. All right. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the board, I'm pleased to stand before you this morning as the Chief Enrollment Officer for the LSU. You know, last summer, I spent the better part of the summer thinking about where my career would go next, and I took a deep dive in reflecting on who I am as an educator. my personal values and mission as a past first-generation student. And I was looking for an institution where my core values and my personal mission would align. I can say unequivocally that I found that place here at LSU. I'm humbled to serve in this position and realize the challenge that's before us. And as we started this past recruitment cycle, I listened very carefully throughout the community around the ideas that were seminal to this institution and what would frame our enrollment priorities. What I heard was clear. Number one, my team was expected or is expected to enroll a historic class of total enrollment of 5726 students with the appropriate mix of resident and non-resident students. Number two, the institution is deeply committed to diversity. So we wanted to make sure that we continued the good work to diversify the classes and continue to increase the diversity of each and every incoming class during my tenure. And finally, we wanted to be competitive and continue to attract the best and brightest, most accomplished students from around the world and provide them a transformative education right here on our campus. As I stand before you, I think that we have set the foundation to do and achieve each and every one of these. Before I really get into the scholarship conversation, I just want to frame for you the challenging environment that we're in. All of us who sit in this seat across the country, and I've been doing this for 20 years, realize that this is the most competitive and volatile marketplace we've ever seen. In fact, some of the research is now calling this the period beyond the period of abundance, where we are in a place where we have not enough students and too many institutions. There are three major factors that are at play in the enrollment landscape today. Number one, the nation is in decline in terms of the number of students graduating from high school. In fact, we project that there will be about 4% drop over the next 8 to 10 years in students who are completing high school and are ready to go off to college. Some regions, like the Northeast, where I just come from, have sharper declines. And this is important for us to understand, because the Northeast declines are so sharp that those institutions are looking for new sources of students. When I got here this past summer, I heard plenty of our recruiters saying, we're finding more and more institutions we've never seen before in places like Louisiana, Texas, Florida. It's because these institutions are looking for new sources and new markets. Second factor, diversity is probably increasing faster than any one of us understood. In fact, we understand that the fastest growing population coming out of high school today is Hispanic, followed closely by Asian. When you look at Louisiana specifically, and look over the next 7 to 10 years, we are projected to have a 190% increase in Hispanic students graduating from high school. When you look at the South in general, we will, in the South, rival the West in total number of Hispanic students graduating from the southern region of the country. In fact, when you look closer, Texas, Louisiana, and Florida will carry 80% of the growth of Hispanic students in the South. Those three states are our core markets. The third major factor impacting our work today is a concern around the academic preparation of students coming out of high school. Since 2006, the national average of the SAT has been on a steady decline, with every single year having a lower average score than the year previous, except for 1 year. In fact, the years between 2015 and 16 was the biggest drop in SAT attainment on the national average since 1972. When you look at our state, the ACT says that only 16% of the high school graduates coming out of our high schools in Louisiana are benchmarked as college ready. Now, these factors are complicated because in many ways it's the testing population, students who are reporting they would be the first in their family going off to college in these years, and also because of the fast-growing low-income population sitting to take the exams. Nonetheless, there are concerns as we think about the future. These market forces have created a shrinking margin of students that we're all competing for. Every year we have fewer and fewer students who we're all looking for, and we're all fighting for the same students. To compound these market forces, students report on a national survey coming out of UCLA, the National Freshman, or the HERE survey, that students are most likely to apply anywhere to 8 to 12 different schools in these last couple of years. So this has really become the most competitive era of college admissions. My team and I have decided to use external data sets from every source that we can get our handle on to do our best to understand the dynamics and develop the right strategy for LSU. Since my arrival, we've set course to develop a strategy that is truly comprehensive and thinks about enrollment and recruitment from every stage in the recruitment funnel, not just yield. So let me just highlight a couple of fundamental changes that are now producing the results that you're hearing. Number one, we've changed fundamentally the way that we search for students at the highest point of the recruitment funnel, bringing in a big dose of science using regression modeling to identify students who have a propensity to convert into applicants. Very different than the way we've done it previously. We greatly expanded, that's number one. Number two, we've greatly expanded our travel and recruitment efforts to make sure that we are expanding our coverage and deepening our penetration into primary and core markets. While data is great, recruitment is still done at a human scale. It takes us going all over the country to meet students and tell them the good news of LSU. Number three, we fundamentally re-engineered our communication and marketing strategy to increase our reach across the country and thematically tell LSU's story, unfolding it at each stage based on the variables and factors that we identify in the research that students want to hear about. Not just about our athletic brand or things to do on campus. We know that the research tells us the number one reason why students make the decision to ultimately attend the college they attend is because of the academic reputation of that institution. We've had a lot of fun telling about the academic reputation of LSU, and it certainly has resonated. These key changes have proved successful in attracting an applicant pool that in every metric in college admissions, every metric that matters, has been phenomenal. In fact, we have the largest applicant pool in LSU history today, over 23,000 applications. 1 year ago, we had 17,000 applications. We have the largest number of applications submitted to LSU from our home state residents at this point in time, and we have an equally historic number of non-resident students, the increase of non-resident students being 70% more applicants compared to the previous year. But not only are those markers impressive, we also have the most diverse applicant pool in our history. 73% more historically underrepresented students applying to LSU this year compared to last year, with historic increases in African American applicants, 80% more, and Hispanic applicants, 60% more. This year, we moved to a holistic review process, which was key in our changes as well. The holistic review of applications is the gold standard of admissions in our work. Every institution in the country of the most selective flavor uses holistic review to evaluate their applications. The research for the past 40 years is clear. Students are so much more than a test score. The complexities of who these students are can be measured, and we can use research to outline who has the propensity to succeed on our campus. We've done that. We've looked for ways in which we can include students who we think will be an asset to our community. These changes have been fundamental to the work and have led to the historic results. Now our focus is exclusively on yield. Every freshman in this country will make a decision to attend their school by May 1. We think we have set the foundation to reach for history for this institution. We also think we have probably one of the best composed applicant pools, certainly one of the most accomplished applicant pools, one of the most diverse applicant pools, not just here locally, but I would think one of the very best in the country. But now's our moment. We know that the most critical part of our work is yielding a class. Back in the fall semester, we spent an inordinate amount of time working with consultants to really think about econometric modeling and how we can use that science to fully understand what it would take for students to convert into actual enrolls. We used over 300 different variables with over 3 years of data, looking backwards to identify those variables that would tell us what are the students really interested in and how much would it cost to actually get them here. The model was able to show significant areas of concern for enrollment and opportunities for us that would be core to cement our enrollment goals. These opportunities are presented in the 3 scholarship proposals that you have in front of you. The 3 awards are, number 1, the Innovation Award. The Innovation Award targeting resident students with significant need who are not eligible for Pelican Promise. The Innovation Award would be on top of any additional merit money that the student would be eligible for and is focused on need for resident students. Number 2, the Tiger Excellence Non-Resident Award. This award targets non-resident students who have an ACT 28 or 29. The award would be in the amount of $15,335. That would be up from a little over $10,000 they received last year. And the final award is the LSU Transformation Award, targeting resident and non-resident students with an ACT 26 and 27. For residents, that would be an amount of $500. For non-residents, it would be an amount of $13,335. The last award that I just mentioned, LSU Transformation Merit, that ACT band is the battleground for every institution in the country doing business for non-resident students. In essence, you're talking about a student who has an ACT or SAT of about 1,200. So these 3 scholarships are really foundational and critical to enrolling the class that we're seeking to get here. In fact, I've been on the road all week long doing admitted student receptions throughout the country, and we have seen enthusiasm like no other in these receptions. I think about being in New York City on Sunday with over 200 people in the audience in New York City to hear about LSU, students who drove as far from New York City as Philadelphia and Massachusetts to get to hear our message. Washington, D.C., equally impressive. We had 2 events in Florida, same turnout. We have had an 85% show rate from the students who registered. That is the strongest show rate I've ever seen in my career. So the enthusiasm for this institution is unbelievable. Yet the vast majority who are coming to hear our message are saying they have not made their decision on where they're going to attend. One by one, parents are indicating that they're waiting for the merit scholarship offer. They're still waiting to make their final choice. Over the last 3 years, 45% of our final enrollment came in the last 14 days of April. Families are simply holding on to their money to really understand the full cost of the offer. In fact, in Washington, D.C., I met Ms. Andrea Walbrook. Her son was admitted and has LSU as her #1 choice. Based on his qualifications, the family was notified that they have an initial offer of $3,335, which is the current Tiger Nation scholarship. Ms. Walbrook indicated how disappointed she was to see an offer of that amount, and that LSU's offer was significantly different as an outlier compared to the other institutions she's been admitted to. Ms. Walbrook was pleading for us to think about the scholarship offer to be more competitive in order for her family to make the sound financial decision as an out-of-state student to choose LSU and make her son's dream come true. So this is an opportunity for us to accomplish the extraordinary. We know that this year we have the foundation for many, many years to come in terms of recruitment practice and the enthusiasm in the marketplace. Our practice will always be centered on using the best informed research, best practice, and the use of big data to inform how we do this work. It has never been any different for me in any other institution. We know that the marketplace is really a competitive one, but we also know that a foundational element to success of enrolling class is a strategic use of our scholarship money. In fact, it is important for us as an institution to understand that the investment in merit monies is solely to compete for the students we want most, without letting them make another decision in a different way for another institution. And the strategic use of scholarship money is foundational to leveraging our net tuition revenue. So I'm excited to finish our work in enrolling this historic class. I thank this community. It's been an extraordinary effort by everyone involved, everyone who's touched the work of recruitment in the cycle. And I want to thank everyone for their opportunity for contributing that effort and collaboration. We should all be proud of the class that we've recruited this year. I believe it will be a historic class, and I do think that all the country's eyes will be on us once we announce the class that we've set for this institution this year. Thank you very much. That concludes my report.
Board members, are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not on the committee, but could I make a statement, please?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. I thought your presentation was outstanding. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
You said something that really gave me a great sense of pride and smile when you mentioned the percentages early on, especially with the Hispanic.
Yes.
Two of my grandchildren are Hispanic. They're very young, but it's my hope that in the distant future, they will help fill that percentage prediction that you made.
Yes.
I just want to thank you for bringing that out.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Other members of the board, any questions?
Well, Rolf, well, just real quick, thank you so much for your report. I think it's exciting to hear that. I've got 4 boys, all of which have come to LSU. My last will graduate in May, so I've done my part. But, but no, I hear this all the time, the point you were making about scholarship offers, and so many times when I'm talking to kids in Central Louisiana who are going to another school in the state, so often they tell me it's about the awards that they are receiving on scholarships and that LSU just is not competitive on some of those real high-end students. So I'm glad to see us taking these initiatives. I think it will help us in all parts of the state and around the country. So thank you very much.
And I think, if I could just comment to your point, it really is about using tools like an econometric model to know exactly what that price point should be, so that we're not overspending, we're not underspending. We just want to take cost off the table. We want to be in the market with the right offer to make sure that we're yielding the class. And that's what econometric modeling will allow us to do.
Right. Yes, Mike.
Can you tell me, how about the uncertainty of TOPS? Has that affected our recruitment?
We're hearing a lot of conversation about it. I think that there's still a lot of enthusiasm. As we have a number of different events for the administrative receptions across the state set. It looks like students are registering to come out to hear our message, but nothing is said until they put the deposit down and say, yes, I'm in fact attending LSU. There's a lot of phone calls coming into our office about the uncertainty of TOPS. So we are concerned about that for sure.
Outstanding report.
Rolf. Couple questions. The target percentage, you mentioned we have our goals on in-state, out-of-state. What is the mix?
Well, the mix right now is still around 20 to 80, 20% being out-of-state, 80% in-state. We're going to be as aggressive as we can. With all students, we have the capacity to serve more students here at LSU, so we have an opportunity to maximize in both areas.
I mean, we know Alabama offset their cuts to higher ed by going to 60% out-of-state. Is that competitive that we aren't higher, or is that choice?
I think it's something that takes a deeper conversation in a single cycle, to be honest with you. I mean, we've been focused on really trying to make sure that this cycle is sets in motion good practice, not even best practice, but really good practice in recruitment. I think we've achieved that. And I think there's a longer conversation around what's the appropriate mix in the future.
Speaking of in-state, out-of-state, who's our biggest competitors out-of-state, for out-of-state students, and what about in-state?
Good question.
Yeah, well, historically, for the out-of-state groups, I mean, it is more of the SEC groups, right? I would say that it's the Alabamas, the Floridas, the Auburns, Georgias, A&M. That's what it's been historically. I think we're going to see a very different pool of students come in. There's no question that the message of academic excellence and trying to make the case that LSU is in fact in the elite 1% of all universities in the world, and we can quantify that, has really resonated. And we're seeing students that are, in fact, Mrs. Walbrook's son that I mentioned earlier, her choices are Penn State and Georgetown and us from Washington, D.C.
You mentioned the econometric model being used to set the amount. So you feel like this amount takes the cost off the table, makes all things equal in a sense, and is that going to keep moving so that this will be something the board has to look at next year, the year after, and
no
so
question.
forth?
This is a very dynamic time in enrollment. I have not had 2 cycles in a row where our strategy for the strategic use of scholarships have been identical. So absolutely incredibly dynamic, because everyone is, again, if we're declining in the number of students who are graduating from high school, and they're only going to choose one place, someone's going to lose. It's not going to be us, but someone is. And next year's competition for that student is going to be greatly enhanced.
You mentioned that, and the idea is just about the changes. Obviously, change is constant. Disruption, could you address disruption in that? Is that the declining high school graduations, therefore the focus on a non-traditional 24 to 44-year-old with a couple years of college, maybe married, living? How do we attract that student? Is online our direction, or how do we go for the larger pool, since the high school is declining and everybody's coming after and already marketing in our state?
Yeah, no question. I know there's a conversation. I'll let Provost Kubek talk a little bit about that. I'll say that at previous institutions, absolutely. It's a comprehensive class that you're trying to maximize on from all sectors of education. And we have to achieve that kind of dynamism.
I know Dr. Kubek is attacking that with President Alexander on our own line, but so you see the idea of disruption, again, a lot of universities and fewer customers, so the battle is on.
Yes, in fact, we're just getting through a read that the provost gave me not too long ago, a book that crosses really not just the decline of students in high school, but it crosses that data set with the demand in how they consume higher education or participate in higher education. That picture is even scarier than just the raw decline. So again, I think in this era of enrollment, it's going to take a lot of creative thinking. It's going to take some bold initiatives. It's going to take some really rapid and dynamic decisions being able to be made, us being very nimble to address the market forces at play.
Well, I applaud what everyone's done and the success, so keep at it.
Thank you, sir.
Of the 20% out-of-state students, have we tracked to see how many of them remain in the state after graduating?
I haven't got to that data yet, but again, my nose is to the grindstone right now in this recruitment cycle. As we get into this summer, I will be doing with my team a significant data dig on all kinds of questions like that. I don't know if anyone else in the room or Dr. Kubek has any information.
The national average has been 72% in the past with public universities, but whether or not that applies in this changing dynamic is uncertain.
Chair, you're absolutely right that we would quote, at my previous institution, to make the case for the out-of-state non-resident headcount, we would use a figure to say 75% of students who choose that institution enter the economy of that institution regionally. It's 75% of those students do. So, but again, we haven't looked specifically here in Louisiana yet.
I would also point out, though, the out-of-state student that we don't retain and they go back to their state, they spend 4 to 6 years here. The raw spending power of an out-of-state student has been estimated on the low side of at least $10,000 a year to the state. That's on goods and services, that's movies, that's restaurants, that's gasoline. So even if a student, even 25% stay, which means we've stolen their economic assets, the 75 that might return are also spending upwards of $50,000 of out-of-state money into the businesses that we were talking about earlier, just in raw spending.
Folks, as compelling as this issue is, and it is one of our most important, we are running way behind right now. We've got 2.5 committee meetings to go, so if it's all right with this, I ask Mr. Armenter to move to the next thing on his.
Dr. Villa, thank you for your inspiring presentation. Let me call on
Wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back to talk about the consent agenda.
Oh, yes. Take the vote.
Have to make a motion.
Okay.
To approve the items.
Oh, okay.
The scholarship.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are those opposed? Motion carries automatically. Provost Kubek.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, there are multiple items on the consent agenda today. There are resolutions for endowed scholarships and professorships. We also have some conversions of existing endowed programs, again, to support our scholarships and professors. We have a posthumous degree at LSU and the naming of a health facility. I request your approval of the consent items from the academic committee.
Ladies and gentlemen, do we have a motion to accept the consent items?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries as well. Thank you, Dr. Kubek.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that completes the work of the Academic Committee. Do I have a motion to adjourn the committee?
So moved.
And second? Second. Committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Armentor. Ms. Mary Werner, Chairman of the Property and Facilities Committee. You've got a nice little agenda here.
I do. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Call the committee to order and ask Stephanie to please call the roll.
Ms. Werner?
Present.
Ms. Duplessis? Mr. Armentor?
Here.
Mr. Jacobs?
Here.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. McCreary?
Here.
Mr. Yarborough? Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to ask Tony Lombardo to come forward and present the first items on our agenda today.
Thank you, Mrs. Werner. First item is request from LSU A&M to accept a donation of property at Laurel Hill in West Feliciana Parish, Louisiana. The Laurel Hill House was constructed in circa 1800, was built by William Lemon on land he received as a grant from the Spanish government near what is now St. Francisville. The current owners, the Fig Haygood family, who are descendants of William Lemon, have generously offered to donate the house and approximately 2.75 acres of surrounding land. The LSU Rural Life Museum intends to use this property and develop the house and grounds as a historic house museum and will serve as a research laboratory in historic preservation and provide educational opportunities for history, rural sociology, anthropology, geography, architecture, interior design, landscape design, and forestry. It's also expected to function as an important lab and classroom facility for the new Doctorate of Design and Cultural Preservation program. We are actively engaging in our due diligence, such as appraisal, environmental assessment, and the business model of how it's operated and the bills paid. This donation is only possible due to the generosity of the Fig Haygood family members with ownership interest in Laurel Hill LLC. Specifically, this includes Mrs. Frederick J. Fig II, Dr. Bowling C. Haygood, Mrs. Walker P. McVeigh, Mrs. Paul M. Haygood, and I'd like to extend a thank you for this generous donation.
Absolutely. Are there any questions on the matter? We've had lots of discussions about the business model in particular that Tony and Dan and I had a good conversation about to make sure we were accepting something that's going to be absolutely beneficial, I believe, to our university. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
The second item is a request from LSU A&M to authorize the president to execute a lease for construction of Alex Box batting cage renovations and additions with Tiger Athletic Foundation. Let's see. The proposed lease would be effective June 1, 18, and terminate on donation of the improvements August 31st, 19. TAF receives notice to proceed from my office after all lease terms are met, one of which is board approval of the schematic design, which is the next item on the agenda.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Item 3, request from LSU A&M to approve the schematic design of the LSU Alex Box batting cage renovation and additions. I'll call Emmett David, representative from TAF and also athletic department, to make that presentation.
Thank you. On behalf of the Tiger Athletic Foundation and the athletic department, this again builds upon the 40 years TAF has supported the athletic department, nearly $450 million to date. So the Alex Box weight training facility will be an addition onto the existing batting facility. It's very contiguous with the existing design of the Italian Renaissance. It adds weight racks, free weights, cardio mezzanine, maintenance storage, and facility coverage over our existing equipment. Next slide. As you can see from the diagram, this is just an expansion. What you see on the right-hand side is the existing batting facility, and the weight facility adds on roughly 1,700 square foot of renovation and 4,800 square foot of new construction. You can see the weight racks that are on the floor. We do have a pro training room, if you will, a locker room, because the months of January and February, roughly 6 weeks, we have pros that do come in and do their pre-spring warm-up and training here, which is cohesive with our athletes. We also have, if you will, a athletic trainer office that has full visibility to batting and the facility that supports it. This is an image of the facility. If you've seen the football operations facility where we have a newly opened weight training, this is the same concept, same architecture, same type of facility with cardio above, with your weight rack below. Any questions?
Move we approve.
Wonderful. Second.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Go ahead, Tony, thanks.
Item 4, request from LSU A&M to authorize the president to determine an acceptable university purpose for purchase by LSU ref of property near campus borders. I'd like to call Dr. Lazell up for this.
Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman and members of the board. This item is in relation, direct relation to the LSU campus master plan that you all adopted last year. Part of the campus master plan is the strategic acquisition, when appropriate, of properties contiguous to campus. That's both for future growth and development, but also to create a buffer of space for security purposes and other purposes around the campus. The LSU Real Estate and Facilities Foundation was created in large part to assist the university in the strategic acquisition of real estate around the campus and elsewhere. Part of the uniform affiliation agreement that we have with the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation, as well as all of our foundations, is that before proceeding with the acquisition of any immovable property for any purpose, it requires determination by the board and the administration of the university of an acceptable university purpose. That is, they can't just go out and acquire properties without our express approval. As you can appreciate, sometimes these properties come on the market, and we are dealing with with sellers who they are looking to complete the transaction as quickly as possible with the buyer that can close most quickly. What we're asking is that in this specific instance, with certain parameters, that the board delegate to the president the ability to make an acceptable university purpose so that we can have the Real Estate Foundation move quickly with their own funds, not with university funds, to acquire these pieces of property as they come on the market. And again, under the following parameters. A, they have to be within a half mile of the campus boundaries. It can't be for a property any more than $2 million. So again, given that we're talking around the periphery of campus, we're not talking about large pieces of property, but again, those strategic plots that come online, and that finally, that any such transaction can only be completed after the president consults with the chair-elect, the chair of the Finance Committee, and the chair of the Property and Facilities Committee. Again, the whole purpose of this is to allow the ref to move expeditiously to acquire properties, again, under these specific parameters. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I move we approve.
Jimmy Moran is the chairman of the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation?
Yes.
So this will be under?
Yes. Yes.
It's good enough for me.
We have a motion. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item is a almost exact replica of the one that we just discussed, except for it relates to the LSU Health Science Center in New Orleans, seeking the same kind of authorization with regard to the LSU Health Science Center Foundation. Again, it would be, the approval would be to delegate the authority to the president after consultation with the chancellor to acquire for the LSU Health Science Center Foundation to acquire properties under the same parameters that we just discussed relative to the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation. I'd like Chancellor Oye to speak to this.
There's a property across the street from our Human Development Center and across from our property immediately adjacent to our property. This has been in one particular area that the Health Foundation is looking to acquire. There's been a methadone clinic. Some of the patients in that clinic have robbed our students as they're going into the health buildings. And in addition to removing that aspect of this, is also property we can use for parking, additional parking that we need. So we'd like approval for that as we go forward.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Final item.
The final item is simply a report and an update on the Charity Hospital building redevelopment project. I'd like to ask Rob Stewart, who is chair of the LSU Foundation and also a member of the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation, to join me. This is, as you might remember, in October, we came forward with a request to do an intent to lease on the Charity Hospital property to the Real Estate and Facilities Foundation for the purpose of exploring potential redevelopment uses of this iconic property that is very strategic and in much need of redevelopment for the areas around, certainly around the Health Science Center, but for the downtown New Orleans area. The Real Estate Foundation, as we had discussed then, contracted with the Urban Land Institute, who came in and did a very thorough assessment of potential uses for this property. They interviewed several people, stakeholders, community members. Many members of the board were involved with these discussions as well, and came forward with a number of recommendations. Number one, which was do not demolish this facility. Look for ways to bring it back into commerce. And so they have made a number of recommendations, one of which was to proceed very strategically in terms of developing a well thought out RFQ and then RFP process for selecting a developer. We are now at that stage. We've selected a project advisor. Tony Lombardo will come up to talk more specifically about some of the details of where we are. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rob Stewart and ask him to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Dan. And Mr. Jacobs, Jimmy Moran's also the chairman of the Project Management Committee, and he sends his regrets. He's out of the country today, so I'm subbing for him on that, from that perspective.
He made his presentation, thank you. A couple of months back.
Yes. So just quickly, as Dan said, this has been moving along very well. It's a joint effort between the Real Estate Facilities Foundation and the LSU Foundation, which has provided the funds to the Real Estate Facilities Foundation for the Urban Land Institute study, as well as will provide the funds for the project advisor. I think we're working very closely with Dr. Hollier and many of the members of the LSU Health Sciences Center and the LSU community, and the New Orleans community. So I think we have a very good team put together for this tremendously important project, and working very well at this perspective.
The
developer is not being chosen on the basis of certain ideas that they have for utilization, right?
No, we have not yet. We're very early on in the process for even selecting a developer. So, and as Tony will highlight, that will be the point in the process when we come back to the board for approval. This is really just an update at this point.
So an expedited update here. Built in '39, transferred to LSU in '97, and of course vacated in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. Health Sciences Center in New Orleans has been paying the basic shuttered upkeep of approximately $1 million a year for this facility since 2005. So we are very interested in bringing it back to market, assisting his bottom line and finances, and really engaging with the local community. September of 17, the board approved the intent to lease. Since then, a project management committee has been formed within REF. The first meeting was held on September 27th. Many subsequent meetings have been held to launch the project. And in November, as Dan mentioned, we contracted the Urban Land Institute to conduct a week-long review of redevelopment potential through REF. Certainly looking at the highest and best use of the building and how REF and LSU can realize maximum benefit and put it back into commerce. In February, through a competitive process within REF, Jones Lang LaSalle was selected as project advisor for the redevelopment project, and they are actively developing the RFQ. Concurrently to this, as recommended by the ULI report, a committee in the city of New Orleans is being created, the Spirit of Charity, to explore and promote the interests of the medical district as a whole and the adjacency of the location of this property. This community committee is expected to create a strategic plan for development in the whole area and promote the creation of a TIF district and other economic development incentives recommended by REF and ULI to help spur interest by developers and attract leading developers for the project. Andy Copland, CEO of Greater New Orleans Foundation, is leading that particular effort. So on next steps, in April, we would like to publish the RFQ. In May, we'd like to select RFQ respondents to be invited to respond to an RFP. We'll, of course, be drafting that RFP concurrently to that. May 24th, we'd like to publish the RFP for development exclusively to the selected RFQ respondents. In July, we expect to receive RFP responses. And August, we would like to select the preferred developer and begin negotiations for contract development. In December, we would contemplate bringing it back to the board for your approval of the contract.
Please send a copy of this PowerPoint to the board. It's very short, but it's a nice oral piece.
Yeah. It's on director's desk to you, and I can send it to you.
Okay.
You have it available. If there are any questions?
Could you flash back Old Charity on the visual again?
Certainly.
Bobby, check my numbers. When Katrina destroyed Old Charity, FEMA offered us $225 million. Our counsel at LSU tried the case. We collected $525 million on the case. And with another furniture, fixtures, and equipment, I think there was another $100 million. So I think we're at least $600 million, which we use, by the way, we use this money for UMC, for the seed money. Is that the way you remember it?
Right. From my understanding, that was all reimbursed by FEMA.
So we're really way ahead already on this building.
Extremely so.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you for the update, and Mr. Chairman, this concludes the business of the committee. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second?
Mr. Moore, let's have a real quick athletic committee meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Ballard?
Here.
Mr. Anderson? Mr. Armentor?
Here.
Mr. Chatelain?
Here.
Mr. Jacobs?
Here.
Mr. McCreary?
Here.
Ms. Warner?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have one item come before the committee today. I'll call on Dan to present it. Dan?
Mr. Moore, members of the board, there is one item. It is a request from LSU Alexandria to approve a proposed employment contract with Mr. Larry Cordero, the head coach of the men's basketball team. He is the current coach. As you may be aware, they have been highly successful program, and the chancellor and the institution would like to move forward with a 2-year contract. You have the details before you of the 2-year contract. Base salary of $70,000 in the first year and $75,000 in the second, with related incentives. We would recommend your approval of that, but I would like to ask Chancellor Wong if he has anything he'd like to add.
Thank you, Dan. Coach Larry Cordero is a rare coach. I've had many conversations with him in my 15 months as his chancellor. If you talk with him, he doesn't talk like a coach. He sounds like a strategist and philosopher at the same time. He has been approached a few times by different schools in the last 15 months I've been here. So every time we get to retain him, I feel we accomplished something important. So I would appreciate your support to give him a modest increase in his salary and retain him for another year.
Thank you, Chancellor. Do we have any questions?
I would just echo Dr. Wong.
Call the roll for that?
Yeah. Yes. We do. Yeah.
Okay.
I would just echo Dr. Wong's conversation. I mean, Larry's a very rare coach, does a great job, not just representing our basketball team and coaching and molding our young men, but also representing LSUA throughout the community.
Very well said.
I would certainly recommend that and make the motion to approve his contract.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Jacobs. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Mr. Albrook?
If I could just add in, not being on the committee, but I'd like to make a request that we have the opportunity for him to come speak to us again, to build us all up. He's a great guy.
Try to show a little more enthusiasm next time.
I think his record is like around 304. He's about 300. It's something unbelievably phenomenal.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. This completes the business of the committee today. Is there a motion to adjourn? Move second. We stand adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. That concludes the morning committee meetings. We would ask all of the board members to very quickly move out under the portico so that we can get on the bus and go to the College of Art and Design for lunch. We got on a pretty tight schedule. So thank you all, and we will see you back here at 1 o'clock.
Jason.